Welcome to the Bella Infidelity Stories channel, a place where we delve into authentic narratives filled with surprising turns. If you found the video enjoyable, consider subscribing and giving it a thumbs up. It truly contributes to the growth of our channel. Now, let's immerse ourselves in the narrative. I'm Hank, an everyday person, nothing remarkable about me. At 29, I spend my days working, making deliveries, navigating the streets, dropping off packages, and picking up groceries for others. While it may lack glamour, it certainly covers the expenses. It's a regular occurrence. One might describe it as cozy in its own unexciting manner. In contrast, my friend Joseph is 19 years old. He's a decent fellow, but we aren't precisely childhood companions. Our paths crossed in a professional setting. He began working at the same delivery company some time ago, and we connected instantly. It was nothing extraordinary, yet we would gather after work, share a couple of beers, and engage in conversations about life or whatever thoughts crossed our minds. Just some light and easy topics. There's nothing that would suggest we were best friends or anything like that. One afternoon, as I cruised through his neighborhood, I thought to myself, why not? I will drop by. It was all spontaneous. I refrained from calling or texting him, nor did I inquire about his whereabouts. I didn't have any specific motivation to go, aside from the simple fact that I was nearby and in the mood to connect with others. Perhaps I would enjoy a beer and engage in some conversation for a while. It had been several days since I last laid eyes on him. As I arrived at his house, I observed that the lights were extinguished. I pressed the doorbell, somewhat anticipating his response. Rather, it was his mother. Though we were strangers, her smile as she opened the door took me by surprise. She completely defied my expectations. She appeared, surprisingly, more youthful than I had anticipated. In her 40s, yet she could effortlessly be mistaken for someone in her mid-30s. I'm not claiming to be an authority on ages, but she definitely had that aura. She's the type of individual who appears to have everything in order, someone who could effortlessly lead a business while also radiating a friendly and inviting demeanor. She informed me that Joseph was not at home, having left for a few months to embark on a music tour. To be honest, I was taken aback. That was never brought up by him. He had always been quite candid with me, so it felt strange that he hadn't mentioned anything. Yet, perhaps it was not my place to concern myself with it. Her name was Josephina, a name that I would come to realize held more significance than I initially thought. It seemed to fit her in a way that was almost effortless. It possessed a certain uniqueness, much like her essence. She welcomed me inside for a cup of coffee. Initially, I found myself uncertain about the next steps. I aimed to be polite, so I replied, sure, why not? We gathered at the kitchen table, and she brewed the coffee. Initially, I felt a bit out of place and struggled to find the right words. This was his mother, and I wasn't really accustomed to spending time with anyone's parents. Yet, she put me at ease. She began to share the struggles she faced after Joseph's father passed away, reflecting on the 15 years that had gone by since his death. She had been nurturing Joseph on her own, and it was evident that the journey had been challenging. She shared her experiences of how her relationships faltered after her husband's passing, explaining that the men she encountered were only interested in fleeting connections, never anything substantial. She held no resentment about it, however. Her voice carried a serene quality, as if she had come to terms with her circumstances, yet a yearning for something greater lingered beneath the surface. I absorbed the words, uncertain of how to reply. I didn't want to offer her any empty reassurances about things improving. The conversation didn't unfold in that manner. It seemed as though she simply required a listening ear, and I happened to be the one present. We engaged in a conversation about our identities, our experiences. I shared a glimpse of my history with her, recounting how I had been in a committed relationship for 7 years, only to witness her betrayal unfold right before me. Indeed, it was chaotic, and it caused pain, yet it wasn't a topic I preferred to discuss often. For some reason, however, conversing with her felt surprisingly at ease. She simply absorbed the words. When I finally glanced at the clock, it struck me that I had been there for more than an hour. I was on the verge of departing when she inquired if I might linger a little while longer. "Just for a little while," she said. "I don't get to talk to many people these days." I completely concur, naturally. I'm devoid of emotion, so we continued our conversation. The dialogue transitioned from light-hearted banter to deeper, more intimate exchanges. She began to unveil her innermost reflections, revealing aspects that I suspect many would hesitate to share with someone they barely knew, yet it all seemed to flow effortlessly. She had no ulterior motives with me. She spoke freely, revealing layers of herself that I had never witnessed before. In that moment, uncertainty enveloped my emotions. She had a certain allure, but that wasn't the whole story. It was about the bond, the way she made me feel significant for a moment, as if I wasn't merely a fleeting presence in her world. It was peculiar, yet I found it agreeable. At last, I rose from my seat, expressed my gratitude for the coffee, and bid her farewell. She offered me a friendly smile and encouraged me to keep in contact, sharing her number with me. I didn't give it much thought. Perhaps our paths would cross again in the future, yet I held no expectations beyond that. Unbeknownst to me, that visit marked the onset of an unexpected journey. A few days had passed since my visit to Joseph's house. Initially, it didn't cross my mind significantly. To be honest, I assumed it was merely a spontaneous, isolated incident, me dropping in, sharing a coffee with his mom, and engaging in conversation. I thought it would be just another ordinary chat with someone older, nothing out of the ordinary. Yet, there was an undeniable quality in Josephina that lingered in my thoughts. She was unlike anyone I had encountered previously. She exuded tranquility and composure, effortlessly making you feel valued in a manner I hadn't encountered in some time. I delayed in contacting her initially. I wasn't the kind of person to become overly enthusiastic about matters. Yet, just a week later, she occupied my thoughts once more. It wasn't anything overwhelming, just a subtle presence. It seems it stemmed from a sense of wonder. I found myself pondering her well-being, curious about the journey life had taken her on. My knowledge of her was limited to our brief exchange that day, yet it stirred a sense of curiosity within me, prompting the thought that perhaps I ought to reach out. I shot her a quick message, just a casual, "Hey, how's everything with you?" I had low expectations. I wasn't attempting to force any outcomes. I was merely exercising good manners. I thought perhaps she would value a message from someone, particularly after she had shared her thoughts with me. Her response came in quite swiftly. "Hello, Hank. Everything is going well. Simply staying occupied. What about you?" That marked the beginning. From that point on, our texting frequency increased significantly. Initially, it was quite superficial. We would engage in casual conversations, discussing various topics, our work, and how our days were unfolding, those light exchanges typical of getting acquainted with someone new. Yet, there was an unusual comfort in it. Engaging with her felt effortless. It was as if we were in perfect harmony, with each message flowing seamlessly from the one before. As the days went by, I began to eagerly anticipate her messages. It wasn't that I was developing feelings for her or anything wild like that, it was simply that our conversations were genuinely enjoyable. It was effortless. It was as if I could express thoughts that typically remained unspoken, free from the weight of judgment or the need to wear a facade. One evening, she inquired whether I would like to visit her once more. She mentioned that Joseph was still absent, and it had been some time since we last connected. I paused. I had my doubts about whether it was a wise choice. It was an odd sensation, you know? She had more years behind her, and my familiarity with her was minimal. However, we had already exchanged some personal details. We had moved beyond the realm of strangers. I ultimately came to an agreement. "Absolutely, let's go for it," I stated. Upon my arrival, she welcomed me at the door with that familiar, inviting smile. There was an undeniable quality about her that instantly calmed my spirit. We entered the living room, and she prepared tea for both of us this time. Our conversation began, yet an unusual tension lingered in the atmosphere. It felt as though we were both aware of a delicate change in the air, yet neither of us dared to speak of it. The dialogue unfolded effortlessly. Our conversation touched on familiar topics, yet it carried a deeper sense of intimacy this time. We found ourselves delving into relationships, reflecting on our past experiences, the lessons they taught us, and our aspirations for the future. The conversation took me by surprise, yet it resonated with authenticity. She shared deeper insights into her history. How challenging it had been to step back into the world after her husband's passing. She confessed that she hadn't genuinely put in the effort since then, as it felt overwhelmingly difficult. She had experienced a handful of dates, yet none had truly resonated. She refused to accept anything less than authenticity, and I admired her for it. I shared my personal journey. How I had been in that enduring relationship. I once believed everything was flawless until the moment she betrayed my trust. The entire situation seemed to emerge unexpectedly, and I was still grappling with the consequences. Discussing it was challenging, yet there was a certain comfort in sharing it with her. Eventually, the dialogue began to taper off. We were simply enjoying our tea, when she nonchalantly remarked, "You know, Hank, it's refreshing to converse with someone who truly listens. It's quite astonishing how uncommon that truly is." I found myself at a loss for words, yet before I could gather my thoughts, she gazed at me with a tenderness that was unmistakable in her eyes. It didn't quite have a romantic vibe, not really. Yet, there was an elusive quality, something I couldn't quite identify. She inquired once more whether I would be open to maintaining our connection. Not merely as a companion, but to continue the conversation, to keep exchanging thoughts and experiences. An unusual wave of relief washed over me. I wasn't actively seeking a relationship, yet her request came across as gentle and unassuming. It was simply authentic. "I have arrived, Hank. Feel free to reach out to me whenever you need," she said. I found myself uncertain about where this was heading, yet I consented, and we swapped numbers once more. Our conversation didn't touch on any romantic topics. There was no necessity for that. An unspoken understanding lingered between us. We were simply two individuals who had experienced our share of challenges, and perhaps we could support one another in navigating our paths. I departed from her abode that evening, sensing a subtle shift within me, though the reason eluded my grasp. Perhaps it was due to my lack of expectations regarding the outcome. Yet I found myself harboring a flicker of hope for something that remained shrouded in ambiguity. It seems that the answers will reveal themselves eventually. A few more weeks had passed since that evening at Josefina's place. Changes began to unfold gradually, though they weren't immediately apparent. We communicated through messages nearly every day. Nothing too serious, just everyday chats. Yet, an entirely new sense of ease had developed between us at this point. It seemed effortless. Things unfolded in a way I never anticipated. Yet as time passed, it became clear that we both began to anticipate our conversations more than we were willing to acknowledge, particularly in Joseph's continued absence. He had been gone for more than 2 months now. I began to notice that my thoughts were consumed by her more than they ought to be, and I would find myself grinning at my phone whenever her messages came through. I was at a loss to understand the reason. Engaging in conversation with her was truly enjoyable. She possessed a remarkable ability to remain composed, empathetic, and attentive without passing any judgment. I would share the details of my day at work, the small, seemingly insignificant moments, nothing of great importance, yet to her, they held meaning. Then, one evening, she sent me a message that took me by surprise. It was different from the typical casual conversation. She said, "Hank, I hope this doesn't come off as strange, but do you ever feel weary of being by yourself?" I reviewed it several times prior to my response. I found myself uncertain about how to respond. Have I grown weary of solitude? Absolutely, I suppose. However, it never truly crossed my mind. I had grown accustomed to it. I'm uncertain. I would respond. It seems that's simply the way of the world. One becomes accustomed to solitude. Her reply came in almost instantly. I understand that. Yet at times, it can feel quite isolating, don't you think? It seems to me that there isn't enough discussion surrounding it. A response didn't come to me immediately. I wanted to offer some words of comfort, but I was cautious not to come across as condescending. Therefore, I opted to give her a call. I found myself uncertain about the reason. Perhaps it was because I felt she was in need of a listening ear. It simply seemed like the appropriate course of action. Greetings. Her voice was a gentle surprise when she answered the call. Hello, this is Hank speaking. Your message caught my attention. I'd like to have a conversation for a while. Oh, hey, she responded, her voice filled with relief. Absolutely, what are you thinking about? We dedicated the following 30 minutes to a phone conversation. We discussed a myriad of topics, yet an unspoken depth lingered beneath our words. It had transcended the trivialities. We began to share our thoughts and feelings in ways that were previously uncharted for us. She shared with me the challenges she faced following the loss of her husband. For years, she had avoided the idea of dating, as it seemed entirely out of place. Yet, she longed for the warmth of companionship. She longed for a companion to savor the small moments with. I'm not sure I remember how to open up to someone again, she said. Her voice trembled, yet she appeared unfazed. She was speaking truthfully. I paused to reflect before responding. I understand your perspective. I've experienced that pain as well. Trusting others becomes a challenge when they let you down. A moment of silence lingered. She remained silent for a moment, yet I sensed the wheels turning in her mind regarding my words. At last, she uttered a word, her tone gentler than it had been previously. Indeed, one begins to question whether the effort is truly justified at this point. I was at a loss for words in response to that. It seemed to be a more profound exchange than any we had experienced previously. Yet, there was an essence in her words that conveyed a shared burden, as if I wasn't alone in shouldering the heavy emotional load. She was more than merely an older woman I shared a coffee with. She was a person who had endured her own suffering, her own challenges. And, oddly enough, it stirred a desire in me to support her in a way I hadn't anticipated. I expressed to her that I doubt I'll ever feel prepared for something serious. Yet, there are moments when it feels comforting to have someone to converse with, even if their role is simply to lend an ear. The line fell into a deep stillness, stretching on without a word. I found myself uncertain about whether she would speak up, but then she surprised me by doing just that. You're right, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I had never considered it from that perspective. It's been ages since I've encountered someone like that. We concluded our discussion with a sense of ease, yet an undeniable change lingered in the air. It was still shrouded in uncertainty, yet I sensed it deeply within me. Perhaps she sensed it as well. In the coming weeks, our conversations grew in frequency and depth. At times, it delved into profound matters, while at other moments, it wandered into the realm of the trivial. However, as I realized, the subject of our conversation was irrelevant. What truly counted was our conversation. I began visiting her home with greater frequency. Initially, it didn't seem significant, but as time passed, it began to take on a new meaning. Each time I stepped into her home, an unmistakable feeling of familiarity enveloped me. I had transcended the role of a mere guest. I found myself woven into her daily life, and perhaps, I was beginning to mean more to her than mere friendship. Yet, I found it elusive to pinpoint. The situation was becoming increasingly intricate, leaving me uncertain about its direction. What I understood was that my feelings about it had become uncertain. The upcoming weeks seemed to rush past me more quickly than I had anticipated. I began to acclimate to this new routine, seeing Josefina more frequently, engaging in conversation, and spending time together. It felt like an unanticipated ritual, yet it brought a sense of ease. When a situation feels cozy, it's easy to overlook the subtle hints, the details that seem a bit off. I repeatedly reassured myself that there was nothing unfolding between us. We were simply two individuals who found joy in one another's presence. Yet, beneath the surface, I sensed a change had occurred. She had transcended the role of merely being Joseph's mother, and I had evolved beyond the confines of friendship. An unspoken understanding lingered between us. This tension that lingered just below the surface. Yet, neither of us had mustered the courage to confront it head-on. It was one of those evenings at her place, where I found myself comfortably settled on the couch after enjoying a modest dinner she had prepared. We were engaged in a conversation that held no real significance, merely reconnecting over the familiar topics. Suddenly, she posed a question that sent a jolt through me. "Have you ever pondered our actions?" She inquired, her tone gentle yet unwavering. I took my time to reply. I found myself puzzled by her meaning. Was she referring to how we had been sharing our moments, or was it something entirely different? Her manner of asking seemed distinct. It felt as though an unspoken question lingered between us, one that neither of us had the courage to confront. She continued, "We're spending a lot of time together, Hank. Surpassed my expectations. I'm uncertain about the direction it's taking." My heart quickened slightly. I was caught off guard when she mentioned it. I reflected on all that we had experienced together up to this point. The conversations we share. The manner in which we shared our laughter. The manner in which we began to share our thoughts and feelings with one another. Yet, in that moment, as she posed her question, the weight of reality settled heavily around me. Excessively near. I'm uncertain. I spoke, striving to maintain a calm tone. To be honest, I didn't give it much thought. I truly relish this time spent with you. She appeared to inhale deeply before meeting my gaze head-on. Her expression was gentle, yet carried a weight of seriousness. "I believe we both understand it's deeper than that, Hank," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I can't help but sense that there's an unspoken connection between us, something deeper that lingers in the air." The words struck me with the force of a gut punch. It wasn't merely her assertion. It was in the manner of her expression. The gaze she directed towards me. It was as if she stood at a crossroads, uncertain whether to retreat or to boldly advance into the unknown. I squirmed in my chair, grappling with how to reply. A part of me wished to reject it, to dismiss it and claim that it was merely a figment of our imagination. Yet, a different part of me was aware of the reality. We had both sensed it, even if the words had remained unspoken until this moment. I'm at a loss for words. I confessed to running my fingers through my hair. "This doesn't seem typical, does it?" She offered a faint smile, though it lacked true joy. It felt akin to a poignant realization. "No," she replied gently. "It's unusual. But does that imply we must put an end to it?" I took my time before responding. Thoughts whirled around in my head. I understood that this was a boundary we were about to breach. Once we recognized it, there was no turning back. The tension between us had evolved into something far more significant. It was genuine. With our mutual acknowledgement, it seemed as though a shift was imminent, poised to transform everything. "I'm uncertain about whether we should proceed." I finally spoke, my voice softer than I had intended. "However, I'm uncertain if I truly want to bring it to an end." After that, a hush enveloped us. The gravity of our discussion lingered in the atmosphere surrounding us. A restless tension hangs in the air, a rhythm of doubt coursing through the atmosphere. Yet there was another element, one that we simply could not overlook. Josefina was the one to shatter the stillness. "Perhaps we don't need to solve it all this evening," she remarked, her tone serene. "Perhaps we should approach it gradually, one step at a time." I nodded, uncertain if I truly concurred. A part of me yearned to turn away, to depart and never return. Yet, there was another side of me, one that had been gradually forming a bond with her, that yearned to remain. I was curious to explore the potential of this, even if it eluded my complete comprehension. "Absolutely, just take it one step at a time," I reiterated, though I couldn't shake the feeling that neither of us genuinely accepted it. As the night progressed, the discussion turned to more cheerful subjects, yet the ambience had changed. We had transcended mere conversation, we stood on the brink of an unforeseen journey together. Despite the awareness of the risks involved, a lingering part of me felt an undeniable urge to move forward. Perhaps we won't come to a resolution this evening, yet it's clear that we have already crossed a boundary. Despite my constant reminders to tread lightly, a part of me understood that there was no way to reverse the course I had set. The days that came after our discussion seemed to stretch endlessly, yet paradoxically, they also raced by in a blur. The burden of all that lay between Josefina and me was beginning to weigh heavily on my mind. A sense of impending peril lingered, as if we were precariously balanced on the brink of something ominous. I had been attempting to maintain a laid-back approach, but it simply wasn't effective. Whenever I laid eyes on her, whenever our words intertwined, that palpable tension lingered in the air. It transcended mere enjoyment of one another's presence, it had evolved into something entirely different. It was becoming increasingly difficult to overlook. On that particular day, I found myself at her house once more. It wasn't in my plans, yet I found myself unable to resist the pull. Perhaps I required a breath of fresh air, or perhaps I was simply seeking some form of resolution. No matter what it was, I understood that this situation couldn't last indefinitely. We could no longer maintain the facade that everything was fine. As I entered, I found Josefina perched on the couch, gazing thoughtfully out the window. She pivoted the moment the door creaked open, and a certain glint in her eyes signaled to me that this conversation was inevitable. We had skirted the issue for far too long. "Hey," I said, attempting to keep it light, even though I had my doubts about how convincing I was. "Hey," she responded, her tone gentler than normal. She gazed at me for an extended moment before uttering another word. "It seems like a conversation is in order." I acknowledged with a nod. I had already steeled myself. This was the moment we had both been evading. The truth needed to be revealed, and I found myself uncertain about my readiness for it. However, I was aware that if we didn't address it at this moment, the situation would only become more intricate. "I've been pondering it all," she murmured, her tone soft. "I realize I may have added to the confusion, but I can't continue to act as if everything is fine, Hank." I inhaled deeply, attempting to soothe the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in my mind. I confessed that I had been pondering it as well. "Indeed, you are correct. That is unacceptable." We lingered in silence for a few moments, both uncertain about the next step to take. The stillness enveloped us, dense and laden with the burden of all that remained unsaid. I had a thought to express, yet I found myself uncertain about how to articulate it. I found myself questioning whether I possessed the appropriate expressions. At last, Josefina found her voice once more, though it trembled just a bit. "Your well-being matters to me, Hank. Perhaps more than is advisable. However, I find myself questioning whether this is truly what I desire. I've spent a considerable amount of time in solitude. I prefer not to base any decisions on that. I really want to keep things smooth between us." The weight of her words hung in the air, thick with unspoken tension. She felt a deep sense of fear, apprehensive about the potential outcomes, worried about what this might signify for us both. I grasped that concept. We found ourselves navigating unknown waters. Yet, I was acutely aware that without making a decision, we would remain trapped in a cycle, endlessly revolving without any real progress. "I care about you as well," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "However, I believe we are not in a position where this can succeed. Not how we envisioned it. It's quite intricate." Josefina nodded, her gaze gentle yet tinged with acceptance. "I believe you have a point." I simply found myself at a loss for alternatives. This caught me by surprise. Your significance to me has truly taken me by surprise. I extended my hand, brushing against hers gently, providing the solace I was able to give. "I doubt either of us anticipated any of this," I remarked, my tone unwavering even with the knot in my throat. "Perhaps we've been seeking something that we're not quite prepared to embrace. I prefer not to continue on a path that will only bring us pain." She gazed at me for an extended moment. For the first time, I noticed the depth of her feelings reflected in her gaze. "What are our next steps?" I leaned back, reflecting on how it all began between us. How pure it had been, how uncomplicated. Yet, simplicity had eluded us. We had crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back. We were both aware of that. Yet, we understood the necessity of taking a step back before it overwhelmed us entirely. It seems we should take a step back, I concluded at last. We require a bit of distance. I wish to preserve what we share. However, I believe we may not be able to continue down this path. Not as it has been. Josefina released a quiet sigh, as though she had been waiting to exhale for an eternity. I suppose. It seems we both require some time to sort through everything. I rose gradually, uncertain of what more to express. Ultimately, all words had been exhausted. We had expressed all that was significant. The conclusion was devoid of joy, lacking any grand resolution. Two individuals who ventured beyond a boundary, came to understand it wasn't their desire, and now faced the challenge of retracing their steps. I'll catch you later, I murmured, my tone softer than normal. She gave a slight nod. Absolutely, take care, Hank. In that moment, I pivoted and stepped through the doorway. The burden of the past few months lingered, yet I understood it was time to let go and forge ahead. The conclusion was not what I had envisioned, yet there are moments when reality diverges from our expectations. At times, the wisest choice is to take a step back and release your grip. I departed from her home that evening, fully aware that our shared experience would forever remain a cherished memory, a fleeting moment in time. As I strolled along the street, it dawned on me that often, the most challenging aspect isn't the farewell itself. It's about recognizing the right moment to step back.